Hello, my name is Dolores Pope, and I will be sharing with you today my intercultural experience with the Vietnamese people. But first, I'd like to give you a little background information on intercultural communication. The requirement to understand cultural differences and communicate across cultural borders has increased exponentially. I now recognize that I live in a world where intercultural communication skills are essentially a requirement rather than a talent. I don't have to travel internationally to communicate interculturally. Intercultural communication is whenever a person from one culture sends a message to be processed by a person from another or different culture. The two operative words here are communication and culture. And according to our author, Larry Samovar of Intercultural Communication, communication is defined as the management of messages with the objective of creating meaning. He also defined culture as the rules for living and functioning in society. Now, these rules do change from society to society. So in order to be effective in any society, we must learn and play by the rules. Cultures are learned from family members, teachers, peers, books, any number of host of media sources. The appropriate way to act, what to say, and things to value are the results of being on top of your game culturally. Culture is the collective programming of the mind that distinguishes the members of one group or category of people from others. In my intercultural interview experience, there were a set of rules established and used by a few people to conduct shared information. Cultural conflict could have occurred, but in our instance it did not. Our miscommunications, or there were no misunderstandings, everything was clear, made clear, respectively, by each party. My experience revealed that my interviewee has demonstrated acculturation, and I'm not sure about their deculturation, unlearning of the old culture, mainly because they have loved ones still remaining in Vietnam, who they love from afar and are remembered well. Personally, I realize that I too have experienced acculturation and deculturation in my exile from my native state of Louisiana, and then living 37 years in Maryland, and now I'm residing 4 years in Georgia. We live in a multicultural society. Everywhere that I have been, I've experienced a multicultural situations. Former President Jimmy Carter said, "We are a beautiful mosaic, demonstrating different people, different beliefs, different yearnings, different hopes, and different dreams. We live and share a number of similar characteristics, such as religion, economic status, ethnic background, age, gender, and sexual preference. We in the United States are living with increasing frequency of dual and multicultural, co-cultural memberships. These are simply different ways of interacting to an intercultural encounter. Sometimes our unique communicative behaviors may seem confusing and mystifying to members of the dominant culture, but we must try our hardest to make living and experiencing these differences with dignity, genuineness, a sense of understanding, because, believe it or not, these new people are not going anywhere. They're coming in even the more. Communication competence is another important area that could easily go wrong without preparation because of the significant difference in the interaction of diverse cultures. In my experience with the Vietnamese piece, I didn't want to appear too insensitive by being assertive or overly expressive. There was a need for me to demonstrate respect and caring for the request that I had made to Lee. She drew others in, which was fine with me. Together we made the entire experience one filled with dignity and moral competence. I was moved by what they shared with me, and they seemed moved by the request to share their native land. I am a virtuous woman, according to Proverbs 31:25. Therefore, I operate in strength and dignity. This is the way that I try to be, so it helped me get closer to people who owe me nothing but to love me, and I them. I've been in salons where it was evident that a person was the target of ridicule or jest in another language, and definitely in a different tone. That was blatant discrimination. And no matter what the reason should not have been good enough, especially because it was all one-sided. All cultures have discriminative attitudes, and all cultures, in my opinion, should kill them. But because of spiritual differences and spiritual natures, which are not all godly, and this evil world that we all live in, they exist. My summation recap of my groundwork for intercultural communication is this. When interacting with others, my words and my actions can affect or change the other person's behavior, attitude, and even their beliefs. What this means is that I am responsible for my behavior and how I possibly could impact the behavior of others. This video will be expounding on my experience and interaction with the Vietnamese culture, as I stated earlier. This video will show the difficulties of language barriers, the difficulties and struggles of the Vietnamese people at large, and their pathways to the American dream. My expectations of this experience was exceeded, and I am so happy to share that story. I've been frequenting this particular nail salon for the past few months, which happens to be nearer my home, which is quite convenient for me. The person to whom I have gathered most of this revealing and touching information is Mrs. Lee Thai Kim An in Vietnamese and Mrs. Kim An Thai Lee in American. Lee, as she is fondly called, is a 46-year-old now American citizen who has been living in the United States for the last 15 years. Georgia, to be exact. She's never lived anywhere else other in the United States other than in Georgia, which is different from most immigrants that I've spoken to in the past. Lee is the manager of the nail salon and basically the person who services my hands, while Lisa takes very good care of my feet. Lee was born in Saigon to a family of Vietnamese mother and father. The father served in the military. I'm not completely sure of his position, but his military service was the reason that Lee and her family became eligible for American citizenship. Lee speaks mainly in her native language and just enough English to accommodate getting her licenses and accommodating those who come into the salon. She said that she learned most of her English from television and CDs. Her winning smile is another asset that pleases many. She has quite a few men who frequent her chair as well, and some who have even served in the Vietnamese War. There are 10 other Vietnamese ladies who work in this particular salon. Many of their stories are very much the same. They all are in America because of a military or government affiliation of their fathers. Michelle is one of the ladies who translated more of the conversation between Lee and me. Other Vietnamese cities represented in this particular salon are Hanoi, Da Nang, Can Tho, Nam Dinh, and Nha Trang. I was very privileged to learn of the workings of Vietnamese culture from natives who began their lives there and witnesses of their life experiences rather than from stories told by their ancestors. Lee and Michelle were very transparent with me as were the other ladies who overheard the conversations. They are very communal, and they wanted me to know without a doubt that they love one another. Their religion in Vietnam was either Buddhist or Catholic. In fact, in this particular shop, they display a huge golden Buddha, about 2.5 feet high. Their flag was described in detail as red with a big yellow star in the middle. Artifacts of Vietnam include POW artifacts, war relics, and unit utensils. All of the ladies agreed that Ho Chi Minh was their hero. Some of their customs are making fabrics, growing rice, making pho soup, and growing shrimp. The ladies agreed that the morale in Vietnam is this: The rich get richer and the poor remain the same, poor, even though the poor learn to make the best of it until they can get an opportunity to come to America. I asked the question, why did you want to immigrate to America? The resounding response was, everybody wants to come to America. Then I asked why. Well, because Vietnam is a very poor place with no way and little economic chance to a better way of life and having nicer things. Paraphrased. I also learned that in their homes, in their downtime, they enjoy relaxing in an inside hammock that is strung from the ceiling, or baking their own bread called bánh mai, similar to French bread, and cooking ramon, a vegetable similar to a spinach type that was said to be forbidden or illegal in the United States. Other interesting facts given were Vietnam is a dictator republic whose present dictator is Truong Trang Song, but they are now allowed to vote for a governor. The opportunity exists for the family of an American to be a sponsor, or sponsorship of a Vietnamese now American family member is the only way out of Vietnam. Vietnam holidays mentioned were the Tet Festival, similar to the Chinese New Year, which is held annually and is said to be the most important holiday of the year. Each city or clan, of course, holds their own internal holidays or festivals in honor and support of one another. Again, they are very communal people. To me, it is difficult to know where genuine interaction and business begins and ends. I just have to trust my heart and evaluate the level of service. I've come to trust Lee and Lisa because of the unpretentious care they provide me and their etiquette in serving. In contrast, there are a couple of technicians who have demonstrated a pushiness in getting customers to choose the higher priced services. I detest this unethical behavior. I realize that their culture and our culture differ significantly, but at the core of all communication lies the need to be heard and understood. Our cultural behaviors may differ, but because we both are motivated to get what we each want and need from our business transactions, we exchange information for better understanding, using learned skills, audibly, facially, body language, and tone. I agree with our author that communication is strongly culturally influenced by what and how we have learned a style and behavior within our environment. Experientially situated, from observation and practical or first-hand experiences, and functionally strategic. And that's the reason why I have need for something and who I want to fulfill my need. I chose Vietnam salons because most salons of my culture are not as polite, not as timely, not as service-minded, and economical. These are very important attributes for most customers, even though you would like to patronize your own culture. With the little information that I gathered from Lee and Michelle, I am convinced that these ladies are just like some of us, doing their best to make a living in a world where all things are not equal. Lee shared her goal in life, which is work her best and retire within the next 10 years when her only child finishes college. Mrs. Kim An Tai Lee, Personal Communication 2014. There is nothing unreasonable and unrealistic about that goal, not one thing. It is from one another that we learn and grow better in this diverse world that we live in. I couldn't find the originator of this phrase, but it fits so well that it is a small world after all. In conclusion, I have enjoyed learning about other cultures on purpose. We are all the same, God's creation. We just have different ways of doing and saying the same things. Communication is a link that cannot be ignored. Even if I never speak another language, I should purpose in my heart to try to understand from all other forms of communication. That is what we people do, actively trying to understand those different from me. I can say from my interactive communication with Lee and the other ladies that most people tend to look down on the value of other cultures and then become somewhat offended when they would speak openly amongst themselves in their own language. No, I don't know what they're saying. There are many times of difficulty in understanding what the ladies are saying. Generally, if it involves me, I have found that they will make every effort to help me to know what they're saying. Otherwise, I shrug it off as insignificant as long as they perform to my satisfaction the services that I want and pay for. This experience was very difficult because of the communication barriers, but we made it through, while everyone else kept on smiling. This interview helps me understand differences with respect more than tolerance. I've gotten to know these ladies better and can communicate better with them since I have gotten a closer, in-depth look at their hearts and a much different perspective of their struggles, coming from a totally different culture into my own and making it theirs. May God bless them, may God bless you, and anyone else who will listen to the heart of another trying to make it in this world. This is the conclusion of my intercultural communication experience with the Vietnamese people.